Hi, and welcome to part 2 of this video. If you didn't see part 1 of how to choose your first kayak, I'll drop a link in the description below. Go check it out. In part 1, we talked about considering your physical condition, your weight, the type of water you're going to be paddling, and your general storage, where you're going to store the boat, how are you going to transport the boat, how heavy is too heavy to do what you want. In part 2, I'm going to go a little bit deeper now. We're going to talk about boat designs for a beginner's first kayak. Most likely you're looking at plastic kayaks, but you do have to consider your budget. First and foremost, how much money do you have to spend? Sure, you can go out and buy that Walmart $200 plastic kayak, which might be okay. But it might not be the best choice. And I've heard some kayakers say, hey, any kayak that gets somebody on the water is a good kayak. I disagree with that. I believe some kayaks are so cheap, so they're so poorly made, they're actually dangerous. So if you have a budget in mind, make sure it's enough to get into a quality kayak. There's differences in the way kayaks are built and the quality of the plastics. Make sure you have one with a thicker plastic that has sort of nice grab handles on it, either molded into the sides or grab handles on the front and back, the fore and aft of the kayak, bow and stern. I'm just trying to make this for a general audience here. And some of the nicer ones will have flotation built into them, such if they get submerged in the water, there's still enough flotation in there to keep that boat up on top of the water. At the very least, you can grab onto it until you can get to shore or safety comes to help. But yeah, I think you can go too cheap. So you got to figure out what your budget is. If you don't have enough budget to get a reasonably good kayak, I would say wait. Don't buy the cheapest one just because that's all you can afford. Odds are you're not going to be very safe, and you're probably going to grow out of it pretty quickly. So keep that in mind. You have choices in terms of the length of the kayak. The longer, as I mentioned in part 1, the longer it is, the more narrow it's going to tend to be, the more efficient it is going to be. The shorter kayaks tend to be wider, they're more stable, but they're a lot less efficient. So now you got to start thinking about, am I going to paddle with other people? All right, if you are, ask yourself, what types of boats do those people use, and what sort of boat do I need to buy to be able to keep up with them? You don't want to buy a boat that just smokes them all and you're way faster than everybody else, because then you're just going to not paddle to the level of paddling you want to paddle. You're going to hold back to wait for the group. That's not going to be fun for you. But on the other hand, if you get something that's much slower than what everybody else is paddling, you're going to be constantly hammering it out to try to keep up with the group. And they're going to back off and be waiting for you, and they're going to resent you, and you're going to resent them, and you're going to hate life. So keep that in mind. If you're paddling with groups, you kind of got to get in a boat that can keep up with the group. And so, just ask your friends what they're paddling. Ask them if you can test paddle their boats. I'll say this again. Test paddle, test paddle, test paddle. That's the only way to know if a boat is truly a good fit for you, both in terms of physical fit, but also whether it lets you paddle the way you want to paddle and gives you the stability and comfort that you're looking for. You can get into 2 basic types of kayaks here without getting too complex. Either a sit-in kayak, and that is exactly what it sounds like. It's got an opening or a cockpit where your legs and feet physically go in under the deck of the kayak, and then those are designed to protect you from the elements, but also so you can wear a spray skirt. And a spray skirt is something that it's a piece of material that will go around the cockpit of the kayak and seal tightly, and then it will seal against your waist. So it's basically a layer, a deck around the opening. It's flexible, but it'll keep water from coming into the cockpit. If you're going to be out in big waves that might splash in, or in white water, a lot of times people wear these skirts, these spray skirts, to keep water out, because over time, as that kayak fills up with water, it's going to get heavier and heavier and float lower in the water and become less efficient. And then usually you have to stop somewhere, dump out the kayak, and then get back in it. The other basic design is what's called a sit-on-top kayak, and that's exactly what it sounds like. There's no deck above you. You're physically sitting on top of the kayak. Now, generally, these kayak designs will have what's called scupper holes in the bottom. They're literally holes that go all the way through the boat. And that's for, you know, you think in terms of a spray skirt to keep water out. Those scupper holes are there for when the water splashes in, it can drain through your kayak back into the water. So those are you're going to get wet in those, most likely. And just keep that in mind. You're more exposed to the elements. Your shins and legs are going to be exposed to the sun. And they're easy to get in and out of. But they just come with their own set of considerations. They usually have limited areas to store things, but they can be a lot of fun. When you go even more advanced in kayak design, you get into sea kayaks and racing kayaks. Those tend to be longer and narrower. And then you start looking at the possibility of some composite materials. You can get kayaks in fiberglass or Kevlar or carbon fiber. They're going to be very strong and very light, but also very expensive. And generally, they're going to be fairly tippy. So you've got to balance your comfort level with the type of boat you're buying, your budget, and all those considerations. And then lastly, let's say you've narrowed your short list down to just 2 or 3 boats that you want to go try to see what's best for you. You also have to think in advance of how are you going to store that kayak. Is it going to be inside or outside? If it's outside, just know a plastic kayak in the sun is dying a slow death. Kayaks they just photo degrade over time. Leaving plastic kayaks in the sun is the worst thing you can do for them. So if you do have to leave your kayak outside, think of a way to at least cover it with a tarp to protect it from the sun. So you've got your storage at home, then you've got to think about how are you going to transport that kayak? Do you need a set of racks for your vehicle? Are you going to get the J cradles? Are you going to get V-bars? Are you going to do some other thing? And then you got to think about how am I going to hoist that kayak up and on my vehicle and unload it. It's just more things you need to think about and more possible expenses. Then you need to think about the paddle. You're going to have to buy a paddle. Don't buy the cheapest paddle you can get. You really need to choose a paddle that's right for your body type and the width of boat you have. So they come in different lengths. They come in different blade sizes. The bigger the blade is, the more resistance it has, the more effort you're going to have to put into each and every stroke. But the smaller the blade, it's going to be much faster through the water, but it's not going to grab as much water and propel you forward as much. So it might be great for a cardio workout, but you might be paddling that thing like a hummingbird to keep up with your group. So you want to choose a blade size that's right, and you want to choose a paddle length that's right. And the same thing with boats applies to paddles. You can get cheapy plastic paddles on aluminum shafts at economy prices, but if you want better materials, lighter paddles are going to cost you more. You're probably looking at fiberglass or carbon fiber. So there's an additional expense you need to think about. And lastly, think about personal flotation. You're going to need a personal flotation device, a PFD, otherwise known as a life jacket. Don't skimp on this. When cyclists buy helmets, I always tell them, look, think about how much your head is worth to you and spend accordingly. Same thing with life jackets. Don't buy the cheapest thing you possibly can. Spend some money. That thing is on your body to save your life. Make sure it's rated for your body weight because they come with different buoyancies. You've got to make sure you buy one that will make your body mass float in water. They're there to save your life and you want them to float. Always wear it properly, snugly. But yeah, life jacket, paddle, and transport J-racks or cradles. That's all going to be an additional expense that you need to think about before you buy your first kayak. So I'm going to leave this one right here. I'm thinking about doing a part 3 that actually shows you different types of kayaks. If you want that video, let me know in the comments below and I will make that video. Otherwise, come check me out at davethekayaker.com. Love this sport. Take what it has to give you and pay it forward.
When you want an extraordinary racing kayak made in the finest American tradition, or maybe just own a piece of American kayaking history, you want a West Side Boat Shop kayak, now available from davethekayaker.com. West Side Boat Shop kayaks. The tradition continues.